Welcome to Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Hello, Otterites. This is episode 173.
I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis, sitting in the captain's chair.
Literally, the chair, not the captain's couch.
I've got the comfy chair over here. I'm kind of rocking to the rhythm of the night, as they say.
Yes, Francis usually beats me here and takes the couch, but I thought I got here first today, so you know what? Let's switch it up.
Okay, yeah, totally fine.
I knew I couldn't take the big couch because that's where Martin always sits because he's got his computer set up there so we can see the big screen with the timer.
Yeah. Taking the full-size couch is kind of a prerequisite for running the PC end of this whole deal.
Yep.
But it's not like I'm making you sit on milk crates here.
Right.
Somebody's got to do the production work, right?
That's right.
All right, but no, we're this is the third week of the month, so we're philosophizing, shall we say?
How is this different from other weeks?
Well, this is the one that's about people. You know, it's always about people. We still don't have a good name for it. We started out as our heroes. We still kind of stick with that, but it could be people you know, famous. We've tried it all. Folks.
Yeah, we haven't quite. I'm always like that big Stan Lee aficionado of alliteration.
Oh, love
so
it.
I always want to do, famous faces
But not everybody we do is famous, and
Yeah, because we don't want to limit ourselves because we want to talk about cool stuff. That's our pledge to you, listeners, that we're always going to talk about cool stuff.
But the third week is about a cool person.
A cool person,
yes.
Exactly. And somehow we've come up with the idea that at least for the rest of the year here, or a little past, I think, we're going to delve into the great philosophers, modern philosophers.
Yes, we're not going backwards.
Well,
but we're starting at about the Descartes.
Well,
era.
even though we didn't do Descartes, actually,
but we're starting at about that era.
Yeah, he is the kind of the demarcation line between medieval philosophy and modern philosophy. Yeah. And maybe we should have done it, we didn't. It was pretty good, but we've picked several. We didn't pick them all because we just didn't want to do all of them. But we had to pick the big dogs. The ones. That they say, what was it? Monty Python said, "As empires go, this one's the big one."
Yeah.
Yes.
Philosophers, as these go, these are the big ones.
And the idea here is that these are the people that their ideas influence the world we live in.
Very much so.
Their ideas are the modern world.
So much of what we think about the human condition, which is what we're all about here at Snakes and Otters. We talk about that all the time. So much of that is articulated best by these folks. So that's what we're going to talk about this time here, and we're doing this chronologically because there's an evolution over time. Mm-hmm. I mean, we started with Thomas Hobbes, and then we did John Locke, and we're moving to the next guy here, David Hume. Arguably one of the biggest rock stars in the philosophical firmament.
Yes. And generally we are naming these episodes after the very funny Bruce's Philosopher's Song from Monty Python. And so that means this one is called David Hume Can Outconsume. Which is appropriate.
Yes,
because not only does it rhyme, but he was kind of a big fella.
It ended up that way.
Yeah.
If you
none of us started out big. We just kind of got there along the way.
Yeah.
Yes, but he did not like to push himself away from the table, especially when there was a good port and a pile of cheese.
That's
understandable. Understandable.
Yeah. You just so you kind of get the time frame here. David Hume was born in 1711 and dies in 1776. A year we could pretty much remember.
Yes. So then that makes him quite the generation removed from where Locke and Hobbes are.
Yes, he's the next one. He's the one after that.
So they're very much on their minds is the disorder of the English Civil War.
That's right.
Cromwell, all of that. He's past all of that.
He's during the Hanoverian times. He's George I, George II, and George III.
George III, yeah.
So he's in an era where Scotland's not really independent. It's
dominated.
It's joined now
because it is the United
Britain.
Kingdom.
Yeah, it's joined into Great Britain. There is some disorder, some factionalism in Scotland, but
it's Scotland.
Yeah, it's Scotland.
It's Scotland.
So if you're not cutting someone's head off, are you really living? But he's in an era of more stability. Generally.
Yes, but of course Culloden does happen during his lifetime.
Yes.
So,
I mean,
the Jacobite Revolution does happen, and it's a big thing.
Yes.
He dies much post to that, and Scotland is firmly under England's thumb by that time, as we know, which we've talked a little about. But
generally, it's not the same scale of disorder.
It's a very localized
as what
disorder.
Hobbes would have lived through.
Oh, yeah, because that was systemic over all things, because the monarchy was threatened.
Yeah, but that milieu is important. That's why I wanted to bring that in. Is he's not reacting to this complete disaster that is the English Civil War. He's in a much more stable time and thinking through these same questions of what is the nature of man, and when you arrive at that, then how is man to be governed?
That is exactly it. And he, because of his long life, and because of his great proliferation of works. I mean, if you think back to our Thomas Hobbes episode, he basically does Leviathan, and that's the big dog. Everything kind of revolves around.
No pun intended.
Yeah, that's very true. Very good. I like it. That's right. Yeah. And Locke, of course, who was very prolific too, but they don't hold a candle to Hume. And some of it was because
prolific wise.
I mean, the what is it called? A treatise on human nature is very early in his life, but then he ends up writing the history of England. There's like
6 volumes.
Yeah, huge.
And
huge.
it was the bestseller of the day.
Yeah,
it made his fortune. Even though he was of a noble family, he basically had nothing as a.
They were penniless.
They were penniless. I mean, he had to become a merchant as a young man. While he was in school, because he didn't have squat. But
horrors.
Absolutely couldn't do such a thing like that. Because he's good Scottish background. He's from Edinburgh, I should say that. That's right, because he...
I think there's like 12 more R's in that word.
Edinburgh, yeah, that's right. You can draw a straight line from Hobbes through Locke to Hume. And he's developing further. They're called English empiricists. All of them, which is kind of what we're going to talk about.
Right. Which I find to be odd for him.
Please, go ahead.
So, because he's so against reason as a governing principle.
Uh-huh.
Whereas for an empiricist, generally that's what you think of. That reason is the governing principle.
Yeah, well, the idea behind empiricism, though, is what you are experiencing.
Yes.
Is how you are basing your thought.
Right. It's about what's concrete.
Naturally, you would think Hume is kind of the exception that proves the rule. He's thinking, well, yes, it's your experience that does it, but it ain't the reason part. It's the other part, which we'll get into.
To use a colloquial term, today's colloquialism, it's how he feels about it.
It's correct. Absolutely.
Yes.
It's very much...
not what he thinks about it, what he feels about it.
In fact, he thinks thinking is flawed. It's not
reasoning,
real.
not
Reason is correct. Reason itself is flawed. It doesn't usually give you the right answers. We agree on things as a society based on our emotions, not on our reason.
That's the big key.
That's it.
To build that's your basement that you're going to build the Hume house on. Is he's not saying that reason is foremost for human beings.
That's correct.
He's saying emotions, passions, he would call them, feelings are foremost.
That's right. They come first.
Then we think about those feelings.
Right.
And that's where reason comes in. Reason is the slave to the passions.
It almost sounds like how I would put it, and this may be totally off base, that thinking is just our way to justify our passions. Or reason is how we justify our passions.
That's very Hume.
Yes,
Very much so. He would say
that. And then it's Shakespearean. It's nothing is evil except thinking makes it so.
Yes.
That's what I figured.
As I sat researching this, again, Francis is our guy here who has studied these more in depth. My research was this morning out on the deck. Robert may not have researched it
I'm doing my research right now.
as we talk.
Yeah.
But what struck me about this, and I found Hume very appealing.
Somehow I knew you would.
But on the flip side, too, as dedicated nerds, we are very Spockian in our aspirations.
That's right. Yeah, he would not have seen any virtue in that.
Yeah, to him, that's nonsense.
That's right.
A being of reason and logic Well, that's stupid. You don't. That's doesn't exist. So this pull that I find myself in, this taffy pull of
nice image.
Yeah,
nice image
of wanting to be a Vulcan and being a being of pure logic, because what good do emotions do us? And Hume saying, well, you can do that all you want, but you're stupid for doing so, because
that's
you
him,
are a person of passion.
First.
But what reason is your passion?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
But you're still governed by your passion then.
He is a sensualist by
Yes.
definition, and if you might,
As he says it this way.
I do this with my Vulcan hand salute up here. Yeah. In one of the episodes, Dr. McCoy is accused by Spock of being a sensualist, and he says, "You bet your pointed ears I am." David Hume and Dr. McCoy are of the same stripe. Very much. He is very much a McCoy. You must feel it. You work with your heart. That's what leads that. And your intellect, even though he has a towering intellect as doctor, it's bent towards the good of the emotions that come forth. He's also postulating that emotions, passions themselves, which is larger than just an individual emotion, those are fluid and change with the moment. But passions themselves are much more stable and are much more normative for how we go about. That's what gives us
because
our drive.
Again, reason is justifying what you're excited about.
Reason is a tool that the passions use. Is a way that Hume would have put that.
Because the passions are forefront in human nature. Because he's not saying this is the way it should be. He's just saying this is what you are.
Right, and not ought, because he has very definite thoughts about what ought is.
That's correct. The
is
and ought problem is very influential in his thinking.
Which is actually that's one of his brilliancies. He recognizes we're going to struggle with what we should do.
See, and this is where I always struggle with a lot of philosophers, especially those that tend to be like him, whether it's you want to talk about it as an empiricist, I can only believe in what I can see, taste, and touch.
Right.
Or as a sensualist, which is, as we talked about in the last episode, almost hedonistic.
Yeah.
It seems to take away all underpinning of what is moral.
Yes.
Because
you're correct.
If there is no objective standard, because he would probably deny any objective standard in that sense that we normally think of it today.
Oh, you're absolutely right. He does.
So when you do that, how do you define what is good, except that what you say it is?
Well, that's right.
What you make it say.
The word he uses is custom.
Right.
We basically agree.
But why? Why do we agree? What makes it so that we agree on that?
He's a sentimentalist, is what it's called. And sentimental, of course, has a modern connotation that isn't really matching what he's talking about.
Right. It's fairly negative considered today.
Yeah, but what he's talking about is we are moral because of the way being immoral makes us feel, essentially.
Well, that's an interesting argument.
Because of our feelings about, why am I not a horrible human being? Well, because I feel that I shouldn't hurt someone else.
See,
and then, like you talk about how people are, what is a sociopath? It's a person with no feeling for anyone else.
Right.
So, which is missing some things.
But yeah, so the whole when you start with the whole definition, well, why am I not a horrible person? It's like, well, how do you define what is a horrible person versus a good? There's no there's an implicit standard that he's not recognizing, and it's not just custom, in my opinion.
Yeah, well,
I mean, a lot of it is ingrained by the time you grow up, so that it feels like custom.
That's what he's talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, but that would imply that if you looked at other societies, they would have, because of totally different customs, totally different morals and expressions of morality. Yet that's not really the case. We have similar morality. Now, obviously, it's not 100%.
Yeah.
But we have similar morality in culture after culture. Just about every culture is going to say, yeah, you can't go around killing somebody just because you don't like them. Now, obviously there have been periods of time where that is not the case.
Sure.
But most people would still recognize, yeah, that's a bad thing, even though that kind of stuff happens, right? So most people recognize, yeah, I really think it's a bad thing if you sleep with my wife. Things like that. Or, yeah, I know my wife is going to cut off my if I sleep with somebody else. Generally speaking, there are polyamorous cultures in that sense, although I think they're a vast minority. It's an oxymoron, a vast minority, but
there are familial
theft.
implications of those things.
Yes, well, and then there's theft. That is almost a universal, that you don't steal, that is immoral and wrong. So that's one of the things I always go back to is that you're building your house, your philosophical house, on standards that you deny. You're building it on concrete, but you say you're not. But if you're not building on that concrete, you're building on shifting sand. So if you deny this,
Could you say that again?
why do you keep asking me
I'm having
that?
trouble hearing you.
What I am not saying the word, I thought, but if you it just seems like if you're building, if you deny these standards that are relatively universal, and I know that's an oxymoron too, you're building your argument on on a foundation of sand, and that's rarely recognized, in my opinion. But again, I like to point that out.
Well, and here's where Robert Hume would be. I don't know, that would be something you would disdain in him, but I know one of your other arguments on the philosophers we've covered is they don't always think things through.
Right.
Hume deliberately was attempting to navigate that middle course and try to find a way to an end point that was not extreme, because he did not want to be extreme.
Right. Now, I'm not necessarily. I don't disdain him, because I think a lot of what he says I would agree with. But I would agree with what he says probably for different reasons than he makes those statements, which is what I find fascinating as well.
And one of the things I think that is important to remember Hume is what was groundbreaking and revolutionary in the 1700s did not have the benefit of the scientific knowledge we have today, specifically with regards to psychology in general, because David Hume is all about nurture. Everything is nurture. There is no such thing as nature for him.
Right.
It is irrelevant, and it is.
So he would follow on with the tabula rasa argument.
Absolutely.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, he's saying you are a
sum of your experiences.
A bundle of perceptions and experiences.
Yeah, bundle was the word he used.
Yes, he used that bundle of, I forget where it was here, but it was bundle of experiences is a good way to put it for us.
But for someone who sees passion as above reason, he ends up being very much a person who drove science. Because again, he is emphasizing you've got to observe this. And so the scientific method of observe, repeat, and all that is very much part of this Locke-Hume tradition.
That's right, because since everything is about is about what is touchable and seeable, it's also therefore observable, either directly or indirectly. And he speaks a long time about deduction and induction.
Yes, he's totally against inductive reasoning.
Right,
yes,
absolutely. He thinks it's all about, you must be deductive on that. And this kind of leads him to that, and we talk a lot about free will, which he thinks is, shall we say, bogus.
No, he defended free will.
Yeah, but it's different for him. He doesn't see it. He doesn't see it always as the same thing. We'll get into that.
Well, because I don't know that he uses this, but he says it about reason. You can make the argument that for a sensualist, you are a slave to your passions, and just as he says, reason is and ought only to be the slave of passions. So he recognizes that as a concept. Mm-hmm. So whether he would apply that to himself.
Your reason serves to have you think about your passions as a scaffolding for how you think about your enthusiasms and your passions. And so therefore that's the problem of induction and inductive reasoning is just because you observed it so many times doesn't mean it's going to happen again. You can't that's the flaw of reason.
Because it's always possible it might not.
Yeah.
Which seems rather, I mean, from a practical standpoint, seems rather ridiculous at times. But he's arguing from a philosophical standpoint, saying it's not impossible.
Right.
That's all you need is just that one possibility out of a million that it might be different, and the whole argument falls apart.
Right. You can't say that the sun will come up tomorrow just because you have experienced the sun coming up every morning of your life. However, that then led to the science of, well, okay, we can predict because of mathematics that yes, the sun will come up tomorrow.
You still can't guarantee that
until it explodes.
Right. Or the second coming, or whatever.
Yeah.
Or that you die before the sun comes up tomorrow. And for you, the sun never comes up again. So... And I get that, but I think most people, when we talk about reason, and to reason things out, we recognize that it's a rare instance where we can come up with anything that is truly an absolute. So, for instance, thou shalt not kill is not technically an absolute.
No.
As a matter of fact, it's not actually thou shalt not kill, it's thou shalt not murder.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is the best translation
It's
of
phrased
that word.
in an absolutist language, but it is not.
Because it sets
absolute.
the ideal.
Right, exactly. Because
And that's what reason often is talking about when we talk about morals. We're talking about the ideal, not the actuality. Because moral philosophers would recognize, well, of course we're going to fall short. That's the whole reason why we have moral philosophers. We know we're going to fall short. And that we're not perfect. Because if we were all perfect, passion could rule everything. But because we're not, there has to be reason.
And he recognizes there are two types of knowledge as well, one of which is the mathematical type and the other are the sensual type. So he recognizes there are such things as that can be absolutes in the case of mathematics.
2 plus 2 will always equal 4.
That's correct. But
unless it's
he sees that
base 3.
Yeah. He sees that that's essentially an irrelevant type of knowledge. It doesn't. It's not helpful when it comes to humanity.
Right.
And that's because that's what he's interested in talking about.
Well, yeah.
And in doing that, though, he's then driving scientific inquiry.
Absolutely.
He's providing a basis by
So
which...
you've said that several times. Because I'm not familiar with that line of reasoning. Because, again, I'm real bad about doing my research ahead of time.
Yeah.
So give me an example of that. Because just saying that does not prove that to me.
Good.
Because I don't have the background for it. So who is looking at Hume's arguments and saying, well, by God, I'm going to do this?
Well, again, because he's saying this problem of induction, that you can't use inductive reasoning to come up with a predictable system, you must observe it.
Right. I get he's saying that.
Right. So that becomes what all of the empiricists do, is this, things must, to have knowledge, you must observe and repeat and all that.
I get that.
Okay.
You're not linking the two. You're giving me correlation, not causation.
Oh, okay.
Because they could have come to these ideas contemporaneously, or he could say, oh, you know what? These guys over here are saying that you should observe things. I agree with that. And that could fuel him.
But
So
he's pre-scientific method, so he's kind of a proto of all this.
well, just because he's does not mean he's the first.
Oh, no, not at all.
And then he's saying that Martin is saying that he's driving it. To me, that means all of these scientists are looking at what Hume is saying and changing their methodology.
Oh, no. That would not.
And
be the case.
that's where I'm
You're hearing that.
yeah.
Right. That's what's being. Yeah.
That's kind of what's being said in my opinion.
He's promoting it. He's promoting that idea at a time where it was not always universal. That
right. No, and I get that because this is when that sort of stuff is coming to be.
He called himself the Newton, the Isaac Newton of human science.
Not pretentious at all.
No, that's what he wanted to be. That's what
But
he
he
wanted
was
to be.
connected to Newton, though,
He and
too.
they were friends.
They were friends.
So he recognized that he's using that same. There's that because Newton is all about that mathematics and how you prove these sort of things. And he's wanting to take that same systematic approach use it approaching it to humanity. And that's what he is, perhaps unknowingly, and I think this is what Martin's point is, he is giving an imprimatur to a process that is still in its infancy, but ultimately comes to dominate everything. He's one of those early adopters that puts forth saying, it's got to be this way, folks. Because of his hard reliance upon empiricism. You have to measure it. Therefore, that ultimately...
I get the argument.
He's not the only one. But all those British empiricists, this starts at Hobbes, lays it all down.
I'm just looking for the show me that he's driving this is all I was getting at. Because you guys are both telling me what I already know. Mm-hmm. I get that he's saying that. I want to know, who did he influence?
Newton.
Well,
and Newton being one of those cornerstone guys that the scientific method is built on.
Did Newton get the idea from him? Is the point? Or are they? Is this one of those things where again?
I think it's a cross pollination, like he was talking about.
Okay, yes. So to me that's a little different. And again, I'm not trying to get stuck on this. He's driving it.
Okay,
but that just to me,
Newton
needed more exploration. Because cross-pollination, to me, sounds a lot more realistic and likely than one guy driving the adoption of the
perhaps driving is the wrong word, because it's going both directions. Hume is looking at what Newton is doing, mm-hmm. and that's influencing his direction of, we can't know anything until we're observing it.
That's right.
Sure.
And Hume, and this might be a little bit of a reach on my part, but I'm probably safe in this. Hume articulates all that in ways that are revolutionary in many ways that Newton's not worried about. He's worried about doing the work.
Right.
And,
well, he's a philosopher, so that's to be expected. I think you're probably safe.
That's why that you can look to Hume as being one of those groundbreaking folks, because Newton is doing the work that he's talking about at the same time together. And
Hume is validating to his audience Newton's work.
Exactly. They were
where the audiences might not be the same, but with Hume's validation, that becomes a direction to then take philosophy of stop making stuff up and let's do things that we're really observing in our philosophy.
And that's kind of the fruit of empiricism, which, in many respects, scientific method, if it weren't for empiricism, wouldn't even exist. We wouldn't have thought of it. That has to be the roots of that. If it's all about measuring things, well, then let's measure. And the next thing you know, we realize, we can take that tool, just like Newtonian mathematics, and go to completely different places.
I would say that the scientific method has probably existed for centuries in this respect. People wouldn't have called it that. It wouldn't have been so formal but every woman who was ever burned as a witch because they were putting together potions to help cure the sick in their village was using the scientific method or had benefited from it.
Sure.
Because people, either she or people before her, figured out what combination of herbs and whatever else would help certain conditions.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct. Yeah. So it's observation, trial and error.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So he is definitely building on the past. I will grant you that.
Oh yeah, it's not.
He did not invent the science. He just formalized it.
It's formalization is the word.
Yeah. I would say. Yeah, I don't say he invented it.
Yeah, formalizes is the better word because.
But I find it interesting though your statement earlier about looking at the mathematics side and wanting to apply that to humanity, which is because. And again, I'm not trying to be the curmudgeon in all of this. I feel like I am.
Curmudge.
It's okay.
But I find that a fascinating approach, if that's really what he was doing. And not that I doubt you, I'm just speaking. If that's really what he's doing, because that seems to be a very odd thing for somebody who says we are driven by passions to do. Because you're talking about, systematizing humanity.
Yeah.
In other words, to me, that sounds very dehumanizing, taking passions out of it. Because if you reduce everything to a formula, which is essentially what we're talking about when we're talking about mathematics, where do passions come in?
But that's exactly the question he's trying to answer.
That's exactly it. That's what
that's where he is.
Fascinates him. That's the rabbit he's constantly
Well, he
chasing.
might have been a very smart guy then.
It's
that's one of the reasons he's so influential.
Compatibilism. Francis could probably say it better. Compatibilism or compatibilism.
Yeah, compatibilism.
Compatibilism, because that's what he's trying to reconcile. A world in which there's all these physical laws that we're exploring through our observations and experiences, and that Newton is categorizing, with the idea that we are making decisions based on passion being served by our reason. Free will, liberty, these concepts, he's justifying why those still exist, even though we're exploring a world that we know has gravity and, water boils at X.
Laws of nature.
Yes, these laws of nature, these deterministic systems, but we still can make our own decisions. He's trying to explore that very question.
The man is amazingly, as we've spoken about, prolific, and he's well broad on the way he talks about things. We talked a little bit about in the last episode. He's not just interested in the nature of humanity. He's interested in things like aesthetics. Mm-hmm. What's beautiful? I mean, literally, he wrote a thing on the standard of taste. It literally talking about that. He recognizes that he says no rules can be drawn up about what is a tasteful object, meaning beauty. He just says you can't do that. That goes back to that. He's at his heart, Hume is a skeptic.
Yes.
About everything, and that if you had to pick one word to describe him, I think that's where the skeptic you would have to lie.
Yes.
So he is less proscriptive than we might be comfortable with at times, I think, because he's one of those that is very quick to say, nah, I don't believe that.
So
that's what got him in trouble.
Well, that's right. Because he ends up critiquing religion at a time
which is you just
not
don't
a good thing in the 1700s. Now he's able to tap dance because everybody likes old David. Come on, have a turkey leg with us here and sit down and talk.
Pour you another glass.
That's right, bring another glass because of his outgoing personality. And
which is not something you expect in somebody who's a philosopher. That's
right, but he was, of course, he's a writer, and he's written this history book that everybody's read.
Right.
So he's got this rock star quality to him at the time where everybody wanted to be his buddy.
I wonder what they called that in the 1700s, because obviously it wouldn't have been rock star.
Yeah, I know, that's a very good question. I wonder what that, the celebrity of the time.
Yeah, literati, I guess maybe, or
I think that literati would probably not be.
That's one of the things. He's kind of like Voltaire in that, because everybody knew him, everybody read him, and everybody thought he was all that. And they're contemporaries, by the way. And that's a lot of what kept him inoculated. How'd you like that word? Mm-hmm. Against the times that could have made him.
He had a lot of friends who stood up for him and said, "Oh no, he's just kind of a deist. He's not really an atheist."
Right. Well, he did believe in God, because there's a piece here where he's talking about. It's not God probably as we would, probably more of a Unitarian type, because he very heavily influenced them.
Yeah.
He made an argument for God from design. So, the clockmaker definition of God, like a Thomas Jefferson would believe. But at
the same time, Jefferson wanted to have his books excluded from the colonies, but Madison was a huge fan.
Right.
I mean, he's provoking all these different reactions in people. Like Voltaire, he's very influential in the U.S. He supported American independence.
Well, being Scottish, I would think so. Yeah.
So he didn't want to settle as a Whig or a Tory either way, but he did favor American independence, and he thought it would be a great experiment.
So I think. This is not a summation because I don't want to end the episode, but I guess what comes to mind with Hume is just, damn it, man, piss or get off the pot, make a decision.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of that.
Oh, yeah, because he's criticized a lot for that because he brings up a lot of questions that he doesn't completely answer.
Well, and that's where I'm going with this. So, because it's one thing to postulate these things, and this is the danger when you start postulating these ideas. some little asshole like me is going to come along and say, well, if you do that, then this. It's like, well, yeah. It's like, well, then how are you supporting this? It's it's like, well, it's like on the internet now. If you say, "Oh, I love oranges," it's like, really? So why do you hate apples?
Yeah.
It's not what I'm trying to do. But I guess I'm looking for a broader, a more full explanation of the philosophical ideas that he's had. And maybe he's just one of those guys that likes putting out the questions. But I like guys who also answer the questions.
I wish I could get my arms around his work as well as we probably should to do him justice in an hour.
Well, but you need a guy that is like this, though, to ask the questions.
Very much so, because he's highly articulate.
Yeah.
He's very, very he's subversive in many ways. He almost got kicked out of Church of Scotland at one point because they called him an atheist, and he's seen as religiously intolerant people did not understand his philosophy. And that's hard in this era to be able to be successful.
But to be realistic, though, the common man never understands the writings of the philosophers. The difference today is that everybody has a voice, whereas everybody didn't 250 years ago, or 270 years ago when he died. And he made it to 76, so we'll say 250 years ago. So if not everybody had a voice, there are fewer people to listen to and evaluate. And for the most part, most people didn't read. So you got a much smaller set of people who would argue about these things and go back and forth. So, somebody like Hume today would get lost in the shuffle. Just because he's just one more voice. It's really hard to be a modern philosopher.
Yeah. He was certainly unique and an oddball in his time, and was comfortable with that.
He kind of reminds me a little bit of Chesterton in the sense that he sounds like one of those guys that you just great to hang around, have a beer with, and have a big meal with, because Chesterton liked he didn't like to push away from the table either.
Yes.
And he was full of wit and great sayings.
And I compared him favorably to our friend Marcus Aurelius today as well.
Yes.
Another person who is comfortable being an oddball.
Yes.
Comfortable being
the
doesn't have to think like everyone else does, and is okay with that.
For Marcus, I would say he's comfortable being the balloon pricker.
Yeah.
Or popper, shall we say.
He would prefer the word prick, I'm sure.
Yes. But that would be Hume as well.
Yeah.
And Hume was okay with that.
Yeah. I get the point of his...
And it was and like you said, it's so much harder in the 1750s and 60s and all this to be that oddball than it is today.
Right, because it's very easy, especially when you're an intellect. You go to Harvard, you're an intellectual, and he has positions in governments. So it's not like he is. He's got a platform. So when his ideas start getting discussed, and it's like, well, what do you mean by this? It's like, I don't know. Which is what really seems to be the ultimate response if he's not answering the questions that he's asking, or that he's not worked himself out to answer the questions. And maybe his attempts can't be done. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure that his attempts can be done in a way that harmonizes the way he wants to. Because I think because I like his middle of the road approach, but he's also a bit of an absolutist on certain things. Passions over reason. And I'm not saying that people aren't more passionate than reasonable.
So I've got a question for you, but I think, Francis...
We got to go bourbon break first.
Bourbon break first, and then I got something for you that you talked about. So go ahead, Francis.
We all have some, don't we?
Yes.
Mark, you got something? Oh, you're still... I don't see yours from here. Yeah. I'm still working on the old Granddad 114 because that's potent stuff, folks.
Yes, really that is not something you just shoot down. You don't do Jello shots with Granddad.
No. It's and like I say, I've had mine with a couple pieces of ice on it, which makes it a little bit more mellow.
Yes,
I like that word, but it
definitely does.
It's something that I'm definitely going to go back to, but I got to be careful because it will give me a headache, as I've said before.
Yes.
So I've got the went to Martin's Elijah Craig.
Oh, good for you.
Which,
okay.
when we recorded at Studio R last month, we had a bottle there for the first time on the show, and loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it.
This
really
is Elijah Craig small batch, 94 proof.
Yep, it's the exact same bottle that I had at my place.
Bjorn says that's a 12-year.
Oh, is it? I did not catch that.
Wow, that's really long. It doesn't say that, but again, Bjorn working at a local liquor store, he's being educated in all these topics, and
yes, it's very smooth and mellow. It's not a whole lot on the tongue. I find this, like on the gums and the side. Mm-hmm. A little bit of sweetness to it. It's just very nice. It's a almost like a casual kind of flavor. You drink it and you can enjoy it, but it doesn't smack you in the face. It's like, here I am, which the old Granddad 114, that one does. To me, that one just shouts from the rooftop.
Yeah, it is.
Here I am, which
time.
is not necessarily a bad thing, but honestly, I think I like the more mellow, subtle. Mm-hmm. Old Granddad to me just wasn't as subtle, and I like the subtle flavor here.
I am still working on a little snort of the Green River, which again I do like. I feel like it's a good complex flavor with a touch of licorice to it. It's pretty good stuff.
Excellent.
Well, back to Hume. You had something, Martin?
I wanted to. You brought up a word, I think, that was important. Design.
Yes.
All right. So he is arguing against design.
Really? Because
no, he's arguing for it.
Yeah.
He's arguing against it. He's arguing that no matter what you do, you are still making suppositions based on reason that you didn't experience. He's saying there could have been a lot of designs that all failed. Just because this one works doesn't mean there's an existence of...
You are exactly right. I apologize.
But there is a piece here in the stuff I was reading that he makes an argument for God from design.
But that's not... I was looking... If it's one I'm thinking here, it's actually from Encyclopedia Britannica that says that, not Hume. If it's the thing I'm reading here, you got to go to the second one under here where he talks about it.
Trying to find it.
Is saying that only experience and observation can be our guide into making inferences about the conjunction between events. However, according to Hume, and this is a quote from him, we observe neither God nor other universes, and hence no conjunction involving them. There is no observed conjunction to ground an inference either to extended objects or to God as unobserved causes. So he has issues. He's criticized the argument in his dialogues concerning natural religion, suggesting that even if the world is more or less smoothly functioning system, this may only be the result of chance permutations of particles falling into temporary or permanent self-sustaining order, which thus has the appearance of design. So he's a doubter of that. And
you're exactly this right. Wikipedia quote here, or not quote, but line is totally false then. Because it says his views on philosophy of religion, including his rejection of miracles and the argument from design for God's existence, unless he's saying the rejection of miracles and the rejection of... that is a poorly worded sentence.
Poorly worded sentence. Exactly
yes,
right.
Being now a nearly professional wordsmith, that is a very poorly
That's a
phrase.
What was it? They said in Hamlet, a vile phrase. It's dutify. It's a vile phrase.
Yes,
that's
yes, right. That is very vile. Yes, because
he is rejecting the notion that just because our system that we live in seems incredibly rational and ordered and efficient doesn't mean that wasn't chance.
Yeah, you cannot discount that possibility.
In our experience,
and that's enough for him.
When we create an ordered system, it's being designed, but we can't observe this whatever happened, so we don't know.
Well, and that's one of the things that the whole everything is a random happenstance is so unrealistic and far-fetched and ludicrous to me.
Right.
Because not just because I believe in God first, but the whole idea that everything is happenstance to me, it takes more faith than anything else.
Yeah.
But again, it's one of those things that it takes out any, which I guess what actually supports his argument for
denying miracles. Yeah, because
well, that's not what I mean. No, because it takes out any and all possibility of objective truth. That everything is then relative.
Yeah.
That there's no such thing as a moral good, because a moral good would be a totally human made up construct.
Which he would probably agree with.
Yeah.
He would say that.
Where I would have problems. But also, let me see if I can get this train of thought back to where I had it, because I kind of derailed myself here. Managed to keep my metaphor consistent. So, we're talking about crap. I had something that was really good.
I know, I hate it when that happens.
It was really good that I wanted to say.
We interrupt ourselves sometimes.
We do.
Or each other.
Because you were just talking about what were you before you sat down and
that basically, and I'll just put it this way: he would not have a problem with your faith, but he would, to him, design would be a part of your faith, and he would reject the notion that you could rationally come to the idea that there was an intelligent design.
One of the things so that actually, even though it sparked what I remember what I was going to say, that actually wasn't related to that particular aspect. It was something we were talking about earlier, though.
Yeah.
Because this is what you had mentioned there. You're talking about how just because the sun has come up every day of our lives before now, how can we know that it's going to come up tomorrow? Which, on its surface, yes, that's a valid argument because nobody knows the future.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what he's saying.
Even though with a very high degree of probability, we can predict that, yes, that will happen.
Yes. I mean, yes, it could explode tonight,
but that, to me, says, well, I don't really believe in the scientific method. Because I have observed, repeated, and repeated that the sun will come up tomorrow. Therefore, the sun will come up. Or that the sun has come up every morning. Therefore, the sun will come up tomorrow.
Yeah. But Hume was, as I said, at the heart, a skeptic. So he's going to deny his own denial of denying. Ad infinitum, he will go.
Well,
he say, but you don't really know. Yeah, but you don't really know. Even though the rational, reasonable person would say, well, of course we know. And even though he probably wouldn't have used the term scientific method, he's still going to be the gadfly that says, no, you think you know, but you really don't. You can't know the future, so therefore...
You can't prove this.
You can't prove.
Well, you cannot prove the future,
and that's what.
Absolutely, I would agree with that.
That's what he's arguing.
I would agree with that.
His
you cannot
skepticism
prove the future.
Tied up with that
because you cannot prove something that has not yet happened.
And keep in mind that he's working from, trying to delve into the nature of how we think about things.
Sure.
So,
and as far as that goes, I agree with much of what he says.
Yeah.
Because how we react and respond pretty much proves a good deal of what he believes about passions ruling us.
Yeah, if you just pay attention to the national discourse now or at any other time in our
history. At any
history,
time, yes.
And you'll see that passion comes first. Absolutely. Yes. And reason is sometimes a rare commodity.
Well, and to be fair, because again, like I said, I agree with much of what he says when we talk about this, about actual behavior. Without passion, life is meaningless.
Yes, that's right.
I would absolutely agree with that.
Very, very clear.
Because passion is what helps give meaning, but meaning, in and of itself, would be one of those things that he would almost have to deny, because that's when we get into the reason of things.
Yeah.
But passion without meaning, to me, is just as or even more pointless than Martin's quote from the last episode about the monkish qualities and all of that.
Yeah, being an ascetic just turns you into a harebrained enthusiast for those things.
Yeah.
So hardens the heart, and you're no fun.
Right, but so I agree. Yeah, passion gives, but if it doesn't give meaning for you to want, because meaningless passion is just that, meaningless. You grow bored with it.
Right.
So it's kind of why pornography is as bad as it is because of this, is that it's never enough.
Correct. And
because there is no meaning in it. Because there is no meaning, our brains think, well, if I have more of it, then there will be meaning.
Yeah, and that goes back
or if it's more extreme, there will be
biochemicals in the brain,
yes.
which Hume would have not understood
no.
or had any knowledge of, but he's nailed it pretty much exactly right, just from observation of human behavior. That, well, I don't know why chemically it works that way, but this is the way...
Yeah, you probably wouldn't even understood chemically. Because back then it still would have been alchemy, most likely.
Well, yeah. But he's a keen observer of humanity.
Yes.
And our behaviors, and that's what leads him to be the skeptic that he is. And in many respects, I think, and I want to give us all a chance to kind of finish this up here a little bit. But I think in many respects, David Hume is the father of so much of the way we think in modern times here, because, and some of this is American, but we're very skeptical of most things. I think skepticism is a common thread in modern society in many ways. Nothing can be that good. Nobody can be that good. Nobody could be that powerful. Blah, blah, blah. The skepticism is an undercurrent that we have, and I think a lot of that we owe to David Hume for articulating it.
Skepticism,
or we can blame him for it.
Yeah, I mean,
Perhaps.
it can be a very powerful thing and a healthy thing, provided that once you see evidence, you move past your skepticism.
Well, ultimately, that's
but how can you know?
Yeah, if you're the extreme skeptic that he is, everything is subject to skepticism.
Right. So I mean, it's kind of where he runs in circles, ultimately.
Yeah.
Because for every time, because you're right, we would agree with that, but that's a very reasoned argument.
Right.
And just because you have an example or enough examples that you might think, okay, I accept that.
Yeah.
But Hume's going to come along and say, well, how do you know? The next time it might be different.
But if I'm skeptical the sun will come up tomorrow, but then it does, I can't still be skeptical about it.
Well,
I have
that
to accept
particular day.
I experienced it.
Fact, yeah.
Right.
Well,
I experienced it. I have to accept it. I can still be skeptical about the day after.
Well, yes. So I think most when we talk about the sun will come up tomorrow, we are talking about the metaphorical tomorrow as opposed to today. Because remember, there's 3 points in time: past, present, and future, and that's how we think of them.
Yeah.
The thousands, millions, billions of years, whichever your time frame is, of past is still a point to the human mind.
Yeah.
So is tomorrow, even though there are potentially an infinite number of tomorrows. We only think of it as one. We express it as one. We don't say tomorrow and the next day and the next day.
Yeah. And Hume's position is, no matter what you experience today, you cannot rationally predict tomorrow.
Right. And I, which again, I get that. But every time we go around with something like this, and you say, well,
and yet we do.
And well, I'm just discussing how he would approach things. We get right back to, well, nope, sorry, David, can't be sure of that because tomorrow might be different, or the next time might be different.
Yeah.
So
sooner or later,
in many ways,
it's a hamster wheel.
Yeah, in many ways, his level of skepticism is a circular argument, and that the only surety I have is that he's going to be skeptical. Apparently,
well, that's right, because sooner or
but
later,
even then, maybe he won't.
Right. Sooner or later, there has to be an off ramp to this. For practical applications.
Right, and it seems like he's looking for a practical application, but he doesn't quite seem to be able to take the step to be able to say, okay, this is how things work.
He does talk
eventually.
Eventually, when it talks about morality, he does talk about morality kind of like as the brake that is applied to our passions.
Right, but it's just custom.
Well, that's correct. It is the reason morality is valid in his mind, or even virtuous, is because we've agreed that it must be.
And there is truth to that.
Yes.
Because we all have to, whether we call it absolute truth, or just what we accept as we are going to agree that this is our standard.
Yeah.
But they're not mutually exclusive ways of looking at things.
No.
Because all society rests on the mutual acceptance of the social contract.
Yeah, to use a Lockean phrase. That's exactly right.
And I love the whole idea of the social contract because it is, to me, it's the best way of explaining how a society is built. Because as soon as enough people disagree that this is how things work, or that I believe that, everybody's going to keep their promises and blah, 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 once they become the ultimate Humean, I don't believe that that you're going to keep us safe,
right?
Or I don't believe that you're not going to come in and rape and pillage and murder, which then makes it every man for himself,
right?
It's
that's exactly right. And he would call that custom. The social contract would be custom,
and very much it is.
And Christopher Hitchens talks a lot about this, and he sees it as a virtuous thing. I don't think that he's wrong. He simply, Hitchens attempts to divorce the virtue of the agreed upon morality we have from its religious underpinnings. He sees them as unnecessary or even harmful. I certainly would not agree with his second part of that.
I disagree even with the first.
With the first, I can understand that. I can understand him saying such a thing in good faith. There's a pun for you.
Well, yeah, because of where he's coming from.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, though, is that when you do that, when you distill those core underpinnings of society to mere custom,
that's right.
You have, I think, a much more flammable, explosive.
That is a very good way
society.
Of yes,
because again,
everything's changeable.
Everything is changeable. Nothing is immutable. Nothing is sacred.
That's right.
Immutable. And when nothing is sacred, then who's safe? That's because that's part of the social contract.
That's right.
Is to guarantee the safety of those who do not have power, or to guarantee the safety of the weak, which I know Nietzsche would hate.
Yeah.
But that's part of the social contract. It's so that we can,
it's the whole
have our lives and raise our babies.
That's correct. It's the only it's the only way that peace and stability exists is through that social contract. And if that social contract is founded upon something that is mutable, sand as it were, then we're all in danger. If not today, temporarily so.
Yeah.
One day.
And I do recognize that, practically speaking, it is sand in a sense. But it's not the concept that is sand.
Yeah.
Whether it's an immutable truth or not. It's people's belief in it as immutable.
Oh, well,
is what is sand.
Oh, you're absolutely... Oh, well, that goes back to... And you might remember this from Game of Thrones. George R. R. Martin. This came right from the book. Varys is talking to Tyrion at one point. He says, what is power? He says, power is not a thing. It's what we believe to be. It's where we believe it resides. That's the only way it is there. Everything else is just shadow on the wall. And he says, "And a very small man can cast a
very
large
Aristotelian."
Very much so. Yes, correct. And that's Martin in his narrative genius for laying it out there, because he uses the image of a bishop, a king, and a mercenary are all in a room, and you're told.
How do you tell which one is which?
Well, and you're going and you tell the other two to kill the other one. Who lives and who dies? Whoever has the most power, perceived most power, lives.
Right.
And who would that be? Of course, he doesn't answer the question, because that is the question. The answer itself is it's power. Whoever believes is the most powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And whoever is willing to use his agency.
Well, no, it's not even that
willing
necessarily.
To use his power.
It's whichever one the others believe is the most willing.
That's right. The other two of them have to be willing to believe one is more powerful than they are.
Yeah.
Because if they believe they're all equal, then they all die.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah.
That's what Martin was trying to say, and that's very Hume in many respects about that nature of power.
And while I agree that it is sand in that sense, I think it's a dangerous thing to point that out.
Yeah.
See that, and I guess maybe that's where I have the biggest problem with some of the things. Not problem with is I think he's wrong necessarily, but as far as it being useful, not that I'm a utilitarian, but if you start pointing these things out, things get really dangerous.
Well, then ultimately, doesn't every revolution begin that way?
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of where this,
But I'm against revolutions in general. I like the one 200 and some odd years ago. Don't get me wrong.
But all the rest of them are right out.
All the rest of them are right out. Yes.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he's talking about. And bearing in mind, this is pre-French Revolution, so he has and pre-American Revolution more or less, because he dies in 1776. So it's really.
He's come up with these ideas before.
Before that.
Yeah.
So it's really it can be subversive. Very much so, because as soon as the society breaks down in sufficient numbers, then all of a sudden the dynamics change.
Well, and he was very much though in favor of the break with the colonies. He supported American.
Yeah, he did. But But when he's writing all this, there's he's writing this in the 1750s.
Yeah, and I don't think what we were discussing here is incompatible with that.
No.
But the whole idea though that it's dangerous because it foments revolution. In many ways, you could tie anarchist thoughts and philosophies to him, in not necessarily a straight line. Because I don't think anything goes in a straight line.
No,
you'd have to stop at Nietzsche first.
Yeah, you got to stop at Nietzsche first.
Yeah, Nietzsche is pulling some of this. I readily,
which is odd because Nietzsche will also lead you into a little bit of foundation for fascism, which is probably one of the most opposite things to anarchy.
Well, I mean, he's pulling the utilitarian aspects, which have their roots in Hume.
Yeah,
he's putting Nietzsche is putting those two things together there, and I do want to mention too that when he's writing all this stuff. This is during the Jacobite periods, so he's somewhat experiencing these things.
Yeah, he's experiencing some.
So he knows that when the social contract, again, it's a Lockean phrase, breaks down, when we stop agreeing with each other, then bad things happen.
That's when you have civil war.
That's when you have, which ultimately is what the Jacobites were. It was just a smaller scale than what Hobbes had experienced.
Right. Yeah, and he was not enthusiastic about Jacobite rebellions. And it felt that was factionalism. But I just, going through all this, I find there's a lot here to study because he's hard to dismiss because he starts with this idea of, human nature, then the history of Britain, but then so much of what we view as positive in a modern society, he's predating.
Absolutely.
He's understanding monetary policy before
we
such
didn't
a
even
thing
talk about
exists.
his economics. He was...
and Adam Smith and he were buddies.
Yeah.
So that's, they're contemporaries and personal friends.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that influence. See, him and...
Well, a lot of people will dismiss him now just because of that.
Well, see, Smith and Hume and Newton were all contemporaries and were well known to each other.
When did Newton die?
Later, you're not supposed to ask me.
I always think of Newton as late 1600s more than early 1700s.
No, they're all buddies.
Yeah,
and they're all influencing each other, and they're all
maybe it's because of the long hair and dress that
they're all pushing on
this
out. This pushing this new knowledge that they're coming up with. But Hume is again very much an influence in saying to Madison. And these other writings, and what they're doing, and I find that part of it very fascinating.
Yeah, I don't
very
think we
worth studying.
did justice to that aspect of
it.
Yeah. A lot of what I've seen in his quotes and writing about him, and just what we've talked about here and what little I've read, granted, I think he's got a lot of basis for modern psychological thought.
Yeah, very much so. He predates all that. A lot of that scientific starts with him as an underpinning. He's kind of like the direction that he tells them to go, and they follow that, adding the scientific method into it. Ironically, that Newton helps develop.
They're very much in favor of this idea of individual liberty, that private property is a good thing, that it leads to industry and fairness in life. Fair trade and again this monetary idea of what credit and all these things end up being. They're starting at a Hume and Adam Smith point. So he's very much
very actually
cool, influential.
is built on
stuff.
earlier writers, even as far back as Aquinas.
Absolutely. I
Surprisingly
mean,
enough.
he is.
It's hard to remember that sometimes, but Aquinas actually, a lot of mercantilism thought has its beginnings in Aquinas.
Yeah.
Which is another great reason to love Thomas Aquinas.
Absolutely, that's right, and it's kind of interesting that
Our seminarian, huge on Thomas Aquinas.
excellent.
That's what I told him.
That's
It's
right.
like,
You know,
you cannot go wrong with
keep that. It'll be helpful
Yes.
to you.
Yeah.
Well, folks, I think we've pummeled the expired equine.
Yes,
Yeah.
we've actually gone about 5 minutes over our allotted 1 hour.
You know, and again, here we are in the middle of this taffy pull,
Right.
Because
We had to go back there, didn't we?
I know, but
Arguing for truth.
it's where I, you know, it's just where I was the moment I went through this material, and I'm still there. This is super stuff.
It really is.
It's
and that's
really neat.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
And there's a lot here
I think
to
there is.
like, and when you think him through, you're like, well, yeah, of course we are. But how does that then? And again, most people probably don't have these issues, but you know, we're these nerds who have grown up with this idea of Spock as this great
Well, I think,
endpoint to aspire to. This
I don't know
being
that I would
of
aspire to
logic,
that, but
this
I-
being of logic, and this being of reason.
See,
Where are we then?
I don't think Spock is the ideal. I think Kirk is the ideal.
That's
That's
correct.
the whole point.
That's right.
Because Kirk is the melding, to use the phrase,
Yes.
between Spock and McCoy.
McCoy.
He is the
that great
reasoned
narrative genius.
applier of passion.
That's correct. The two-
And that's, I think, the problem with
Focusing
a
the
lot-
passion using the logic.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the problem with that Hume is struggling to he's just trying to grapple, and he can't quite do it. It appears. I've not read everything, obviously,
And
so
it's-
it's a caveat. He's
right.
trying to do an either or. It's a both and.
That's right. Ultimately,
It's a both
the fusion
and.
of the two.
Yeah.
That's
And I don't think it matters which one you start with, because you can't do without both.
Yeah, because the Enterprise is nothing without McCoy, but it's also nothing without Spock.
Right.
You have to have both.
Right.
You have to have, and
And-
Hume. I just love that we've compared this great philosopher David Hume to Dr. Leonard McCoy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
I think that might be.
Your pointed ears we did. That's right.
Well, in a way, it's very accurate though, because McCoy represents humanity at its best.
That's right. Yes.
He also represents humanity at its worst in a way, because he is all about the passion, about emotions.
What Spock would
but-
term superstitions and or what is
Sentiment.
It? Yeah,
Sentiment, yeah.
sensualist-
Sensuality.
Yeah.
yeah. Your passions will be your undoing, Doctor.
Right. But he's presented though as the good application of passions.
Yeah.
Whereas the bad guys are the ones that are the bad applications of passion, and often, but not always, but often without reason. So the bad guys are often passion without reason. But the ultimate good guy, Kirk, is passion and reason represented by Spock and McCoy, or McCoy and Spock.
Seamlessly melded.
Yes.
Because he does both very well, as need be.
Which is what, in my opinion, makes Picard the lesser captain.
I would agree.
Because he does not, he's just assumed to be automatically superior to somebody like Kirk. It's an arrogance.
It is.
And that's one of the things I don't like about Picard. There's an arrogance in his own inherent superiority.
Which Q points out quite often.
Yes.
Which
Which
is
is surprising that the writers were self-aware enough to realize they're writing Picard this way as a good,
Yeah.
but yet pointing out that, you're an arrogant ass at the same time.
Yeah, which
Maybe that's why he gets the comeuppances that he does on the show.
Well, it makes him also that much more interesting.
It does.
Because
It does.
you cannot be a marble man is really easily shattered.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But, to me, Kirk is a better captain because he's
yeah.
a better melding of the two.
There always was kind of a Marvel Robert E. Lee sort of quality to Picard.
Yeah, that makes no mistakes and does no wrong and has no evil thoughts and is intending to do the right thing. Of course, we know that Robert E. Lee did none of those things quite often, but that's how the myth was portrayed. And sometimes that's how the myth was portrayed with Picard. And I'll finish out with this. I don't know if you have seen the season finale of Strange New Worlds.
Yes, I have.
You have. You have probably not watched it. I'm telling you, listeners, if you haven't watched it, it's the best Star Trek that's ever been put out, and that's high praise for me.
Yes. Until this, the Orville was the best Trek out there.
Yeah.
Strange New Worlds has finally eclipsed Orville. But the Orville is still a close second.
It's excellent. There's no question. But I will say that the ending of that season finale speaks to this very issue because in an alternate future, Pike is in Kirk's place when the Romulans attack Outpost 4. And because Pike is quick to go to the negotiation versus the action.
He's more Picard-like.
Very much more Picard-like. He basically dooms the Federation to decades of bloody war.
Yes, he's committing the yesterday's Enterprise mistake.
That's right.
It's not the same mistake, but the result is the same.
That's right.
Decades of war that you will probably end up losing.
That's correct. All because you needed that man of action who is perfectly melded between these two poles in that place. And Pike cannot do that.
Nope. I did love Pike in the red uniform, though.
Yes, it was nice, though.
It
yes.
looked sharp.
With the Admiral pin.
With the Admiral pin, yes.
So that's an alternate version that, things may not work out that way. But anyway, sorry.
It's excellent. It's excellent. I mean,
you need to watch it.
David Hume to Star Trek. We did it.
Yes, very much
and we
so.
threw in a Star Wars reference that Francis did not get, but that's all right.
No, that's okay. No, I just we'll talk about my issues with Star Wars in another episode.
So what's next, my brother?
Well, we are going to talk pop culture next time. We might talk Star Wars a little. I don't know, but we're actually going to talk about the franchise, another Deep Space franchise in the movies,
but not just another Deep.
Not just another one. They mean something here.
That's right.
In space, no one can hear you scream. That should be all you need to know if you're a fan of this particular...
Or as Martin has titled it, In Space, No One Can Hear You podcast.
That's right, yeah. We'll leave that very good stuff. Yeah, we're going to talk about the Alien franchise. And it's goodness, it's badness, it's groundbreakingness, our issues with it, our fun with it, and I'm sure it will be a definite love
It's a cultural
fest.
touchstone that needs to be discussed.
That's correct. And hey,
there you
we
go.
do that very well. So be here next episode.
Hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes published every Friday at noon Eastern.
Spread the word. We're on all the major podcast platforms. And leave us a comment or review because that helps others find us.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Join us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.